Good morning, everybody. A very, very big welcome to you all. My name is Ali Board, and I'm very, very proud and pleased to be broadcasting to you in these very odd circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment. I'm broadcasting from my studio. I'm in Dorset on the south coast of England, and this is unusual circumstances for us all, but I'm very pleased and very proud to be representing the SAA today. And I gather that not only am I broadcasting to all the members out there, but the SAA have very kindly allowed me to broadcast to non-members too today. So a huge welcome to you all. I thought what I would do this morning is just talk to you a little bit about the SAA and why I'm very proud to be one of their demonstrators. Just in case you don't know, the SAA are a fantastic community. Not only do they supply you with materials and a fabulous bi-monthly magazine, but it's more about being a community. So there's membership for all. It doesn't matter what your skill level. You can be somebody who has just started, or you might be somebody who has done a little bit but has lost direction with what they're doing. But also you might be a professional, and that's why I find myself here. The SAA discovered me a few years ago and very kindly invited me to start writing for them and creating DVDs. And I have to say that without them, it would have been not, my career would not have been anywhere near where it is right now. I'm just going to interrupt my broadcast ever so slightly because I gather that we're frozen on that end. So I'm just going to fix the technology and I'll be back with you in just a second. So, I think this is one of the fabulous things about broadcasting live, isn't it? That in doing so, we have all the glitches and all the things that we have to work with. So my apologies if you are broadcasting in live. We do have a few gremlins in the works. I will try to fix them as I go. So just bear with us. I promise you that we'll sort them all out and we'll get to it. We'll get to my demonstration as soon as we can. And I'm just dealing with all the things that I'm currently dealing with and seeing that if I can fix them. So just bear with me for a few seconds and we'll see what we can do. What I've actually done right now is just switch to another bit of technology to see if that's any better at all. So I'm going to carry on talking. I'm just going to keep going and we'll see if we can sort those gremlins out. Thank you ever so much for anybody who is just tuning in. And we will make sure that we sort all those gremlins out. There's nothing like watching an artist, is there, trying to juggle all sorts of things. So let me talk about some of the things that the SAA can do for you. As I was saying, we've got people who are just raw beginners. We've got people who are intermediates, and of course we've got people who are professionals like myself, and all of us come together as a community to help each other out. And that's one of the fabulous things about being a member of the SAA, is that you can, it doesn't matter what level, what skill level you're at. Anything is accessible. And you've got a huge range of materials, you've got the bi-monthly magazine, but one of the most important things, particularly if you're learning, if you're trying to expand your skills, is the video on demand service that we have as part of the SAA. So the video on demand has over 800 titles. Lots of people, just like myself, bringing you techniques that they have, sharing their particular skills, sharing their subject matter, all of that type of thing. And you can access those video titles as part of your membership. But one of the marvellous things that the SAA is offering, considering the situation that we're all in at the moment, is they're offering you a period of 30 days to have that video on demand for free so that you can test us out. Now, I think that's an incredible offer myself, because if you're stuck on a particular medium, we don't all know the answers to all the media out there. I certainly don't. I love my watercolours and I love my mixed media. But if I wanted to find out a little bit more about, say, acrylics or oils, I might pop over to the video on demand and see exactly somebody who's really skilled at what they do, showing me in really simple terms how I can get on with that medium. And that works brilliantly for me. What a fantastic opportunity. Now, if you're not a member and you're tuning in today, like I said, a huge welcome. You've got lots of things to explore on the SAA's website. But if you would like to become a member, what I can do for you is offer you a special joining fee. Now, part of the reason that we're coming to you today is to encourage you to be part of that community. And what I can do is offer you a very special incentive if you join up today. So I have a code for you, and it's Alison B, ALISONB in capital letters. If you decide to become a member, pop that number into the coupon box, or if you're giving the sales team a ring, then just quote it to them. And you will be able to get £20 in loyalty points to spend the next time you order materials. And if you're anything like me and surrounded by materials, then that's not going to be hard to spend at all. Now, if you are tuning in, you'll be aware of the page and you'll see me at the top of the screen. You'll see the materials list down one side, and you'll also see, if you're tuning in live, you'll see a little chat box in the bottom right hand corner. Please do pop any comments that you have in there or any questions that you might have, and I will try to get to them as soon as I possibly can. I can see that there's a few questions come in already. A few questions about the gremlins. I think we've managed to sort those out now. What does Sharon say? Sharon says, I don't have transparent grey or a grey ink tense block. Don't worry about that at all. Just use the colours that you've got. I'll give you some alternatives as we go along, and let's switch you to my overhead camera so that you can see exactly what it is that we're going to be doing today. So here's my pad all prepared and ready to go, and this is the watercolour paper that we're going to be using today to create this painting of Reservoir ducks. Now, this was a painting that I did about a year ago, and I named it Reservoir Ducks not because I found those ducks on a reservoir, but because when I had painted it, I'm very influenced by films, and I had in the back of my head that really iconic shot from the movie Reservoir Dogs in the back of my head with that music playing, and it just made me chuckle. So I named it Reservoir Ducks because they looked like they were all walking towards me with such intent. Now, this is the photograph that I used as my reference, and you'll find the reference at the bottom of the page. And this was a photograph that I got from Pixabay. Pixabay is a site that you can gather reference material without worrying about copyright, and I'm very grateful to the photographer. Sadly, they didn't put their name to the photograph, otherwise I would have been giving them credit for it. But that photograph was available for me to download and to be able to use for my project today. I turned that photograph into a line drawing, which you will also find at the bottom of your page, and you'll be able to download those resources, and then you can use them to follow along unless you've done it already and you're painting along with me at home. let's switch back to that overhead shot, and I'm going to take you through some of the materials that we're going to be using today. This is the watercolour paper that I'm going to be painting on. This is my own pad. This is Saunders Waterford watercolour paper. It's 300 grams, so it's a nice heavy weight, and it is 100% cotton. And what does that mean? What does 100% cotton mean? 100% cotton basically means that I'm going to be really mean to this piece of watercolour paper today, and it's going to stand up to the rigours of what I do. And in that, using the cotton paper, I should be able to float the colour onto my surface. I will be able to move the colour around. I'll be able to mop the colour back up. And I should be able to do that without any worries whatsoever. The other things that you're going to need today, like I said, you're going to need the line drawing. I'm also going to be using trace down today. And trace down is a fabulous way of very quickly getting my line drawing onto my watercolour paper like a bit of a shortcut. That's what I'm going to be doing. My apologies, I can see that there's a few gremlins again, but don't worry, that's the delights of doing things live. My fabulous backup partner Gary is saying to me, keep going Ali, keep going, so I will do. So here is the trace down. I'm going to use that. I'm going to give you some alternatives to that as well. We're going to be using a pin fine liner. Here is the one that I particularly like to use. This is a black waterproof sketching pen. I'll explain more about that in just a minute. You're also going to need a selection of watercolours. Today I'm using the SAA's watercolours. Now don't worry if you don't have these colours, it's fine. You can make your ducks and your background any colour you like. And we've got, I'm going to be using cobalt violet, cerulean blue, warm sepia, and translucent grey. Those are the four I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be using them in tubes and squeezing them out into a palette. I've got an assortment of brushes, I've got a putty rubber, I've got a lovely fine spray bottle here. All of those things are going to go towards creating a nice soft background. And then the star of the show today are these. These are Inktense blocks. Now, if you haven't come across these before, I find these really, really interesting to work with, I have to say. I use them as a paint, which you'll see me do later on. And I also use them to create a bit of texture. As some of you know, I'm a real fan of creating texture on my paintings. And Inktense is certainly a way that I can easily do that. So I'm going to pop those to one side. Hopefully you've managed to gather your materials. If you're watching this on catch up, then you'll be able to pause me, go and gather those things, and you'll be able to paint along at your leisure. So let's get started. So let's just flip up the cover of my pad, and you can see that I've got, let's just get that lined up. I've got my pad here with my piece of paper. I'm going to paint straight into the pad today. Sometimes I tear a sheet out, but today, so that it's nice and stable, there I'm going to paint straight into the pad. And here's my line drawing. And I'm going to get that onto my watercolour paper, and I'm going to use the trace down method. If you don't have trace down, please don't worry. You can use this line drawing to scribble on the back with a soft pencil all over the back and really rub it in very well. And then that way you'll have graphite all over the back of your piece of paper, and then you can lay it down and we can do the transfer that way. If you prefer to use a slightly quicker method, then what you're going to do is follow along with what I'm doing now. So I've got my line drawing here, and I'm just going to tack that down with a little bit of masking tape. Now, I can still see that we've got a few gremlins in the works. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check something with my technology, and I'm going to get back to you in the next few seconds. Let me just check something. I just want to make sure that my technology is working as well as it can possibly do. Thank you for your patience this morning. As you're aware, I'm sure, working with any technology and trying to stream to you live is always a bit of a challenge. But I'm sure that you're able to go make a cup of tea. If I happen to freeze again, put the kettle on. Mine's a black coffee, if that's okay. So I've tacked down my line drawing, and underneath I'm going to slip a piece of trace down. Here's trace down. This is the graphite kind, and it is pale on one side and dark on the other. So you can see that it needs to be dark side down. And this is different from carbon paper because carbon paper is a wax-based paper. And of course that is going to repel any watercolour that you place over the top. So it's very important that you use trace down, something that is graphite based, so that it looks like pencil when you do your line drawing, when you do your transfer. So I'm slipping it under there, double checking that it's dark side down. And then over the top, I'm going to use a biro to make my transfer. I'm going to pay a huge amount of attention to the gaps. You've probably noticed on the line drawing, let's bring it up in a bit of close-up for you so that you can see it again. In that line drawing, it's kind of dot and dash, and it's not all filled in, and I absolutely do that on purpose so that no matter what happens with my paint, if it goes slightly beyond that line, then it looks deliberate and not like a mistake. And that is a technique that I use an awful lot in my painting so that I have the opportunity to change my mind, I think is the way to describe it. So I'm going to go back over all of the lines that I created in that line drawing. And as far as the ducks are concerned, I'm going to look for the things that make it look particularly duck-like. So I'm looking at the bill, I'm looking at, they've got these amazing round bodies. And so I'm going to make sure that those are in those incredible kind of, they always look like dumplings to me, with little heads on and the beaks. And we'll get that essence that their feet are in the water. So that's the left-hand one done. I've got an eye in here and a lovely flat beak. They've got those ridges on the end that they use for sifting through any of the pondweed, or on the bottom of the pond, anything that they can get their food source from. So what I will do as well is just lift up and double check that it's coming through. Yes, you can see it's making a really nice transfer. And where are we getting to? Over here, to that kind of fluffy undercarriage that they have. Got a pair of legs in here. When I first did this painting, I have to say I got a bit confused with what was leg and what was duck, but we're getting there. Let's get to this one in the middle. I was going to try and name all of the ducks after Reservoir dog characters, but I started to run out of duck names after a while, so I stopped that. Let's get this one. This one I think looks the meanest. This one is face on. So we've got that bill in there, and we've kind of got essence of that leg coming down. Let's just refer back to the photograph for you, so you can see exactly that kind of mishmash of legs and bodies that I am trying to emulate in my drawing. So we've got this one done. Let's do the fourth one. So I've got eyes and I've got beak and a bill. Those lovely, amazing heads. There's certainly on the males, those heads are the most beautiful green, and we will try that, getting that in with the ink tints later. Now this duck is a little bit different because this one really got a sense of movement because she's lifted her foot up, and so it's calf coming out of the water. Got this one over here, and we've got a sense of movement in the water there. And then last but not least is this one, this male looking very stern over on this side. I have to say, when I saw this photograph first, it did make me laugh, because they kind of look like they're coming to get you. It did just make me chuckle. We've got ducks on our farm, and I do love watching them. They're so peaceful to watch. So I've got this body coming in. As you can see, I'm not sticking to the line too rigidly. That's absolutely fine. It really doesn't matter. So let's get those legs coming down. And then we've just got a sense of the water underneath. So I've got all that in. I need to just put that last little bit of water surface in here. And then I'll give it a lift up and we'll see how we've got on. So I think I've got everything in. That looks like a nice transfer to me. And when you're happy, and only when you're happy, I'm going to very carefully peel this away. Then that line drawing can be used for another day. And although this is a fresh piece of trace down, you can see where I've done the line drawing today. That doesn't mean that that piece of trace down is then finished. What it means is that the next time I can use it again and again and again, and it will be good for a lot of line drawings beyond that. Right, okay, let's edit this drawing that we've got now. So where I've done my transfer, I can see I've got a few little scuff marks from the trace down. So I'm going to use the putty eraser to pick off any of those marks that I don't like. And I'm going to go back in with a pencil to make sure that I'm happy with where everything is on my duck. So I might just add to the lines a little bit. I might put a little bit more detail in. It's just a case of referencing back to that photograph. Let's get that photograph back up again. And I can see where eyes and beaks and those bodies are if I want to. I try very hard at this stage to not overdraw, because I know what's coming up, and I know that if I start overdrawing now, then the chances are I'm going to be faffing about later. So I'm going to add a few last little bits of detail, nothing too dramatic, just so that I'm absolutely sure of where the certain elements of my duck are. Coming down that side, around, and at the bottom. And I think this one's okay, this transfer was okay. I didn't want to make this painting particularly to be about the water and the reflections, but we can't ignore it. The water does need to be there. So let's put a few wavy lines in. Oh, I've got a nasty scuff mark there, let's take that out. Let's get those wavy lines in so that we're acknowledging the water, but we're not overpainting it or overdrawing it. Okay, I'm happy with my line drawing. That's come up really well. Now I'm going to switch to a pen. Now I could paint straight back in with watercolour if I wanted to, and it would still be a successful painting. That would be fine. But one of the things I like to do, this is a technique that I use an awful lot, is to go back in with a waterproof pen so that I save these lines. These lines then are not going anywhere. They're not going to shift, they're not going to move, and that provides me with a kind of map. And that's really important for an impressionistic painting technique, because it means no matter what happens, I'm not going to lose my drawing. So if you've done a really nice pencil drawing and you're thinking, oh goodness, I'm scared that I'm going to cover it up with paint and then it'll disappear and I won't see it, this is a really nice technique. So this is a waterproof pen. That's really important. Don't have a water-soluble one, otherwise your lines are going to go everywhere. So I'm going to go back over my lines using that same dot and dash method, getting beaks, bills, those kind of nostrils, the tops of beaks, eyes, all of that kind of thing, so that the minute that I paint, those lines are not going anywhere. It doesn't matter if I deviate from the line. What matters more is that dot dash Morse code method, so that you can see I've still got room for my brush to disappear over the line if I so wish. I'm going to put the legs in, but I'm not going to use the pen on the water. I want the water lines to be nice and soft. So my pen is reserved for the ducks. Let's get the bill in on this one. This one you can actually see quite a bit of eye on, so I'm going to make sure I've got a nice space for that. top of the head coming around. This one's kind of on an angle a bit more, so I can afford to have that beak sideways on. And coming down to the bottom of that because it's tucked in behind, and then getting the legs in. That's okay. So you can see also the difference between what it looks like when it's in pen and what it looks like when it's in pencil. Much stronger and really pulling away from the background now. Now this one, we've got him real straight on facing us. So I want to get that beak a little bit more foreshortened so that it really looks like he's staring down it. And trying so hard not to put every tiny little bit in, because I know if I start to put every last little element in, I'll start to faff and I will start to overwork it, and then I'll be disappointed with it. So all I'm doing is putting in essence of duck rather than the whole duck. Let's get this one in. So this is the penultimate one to go in. They've got those amazing, huge, great nostrils that they shut off when they dive under the water. So I need to get those in. Coming down and around, coming down to the bottom. We've got this foot being lifted up. Again, don't forget, this is a really significant part of the painting to show the movement of the duck walking towards us. And then along on the right-hand side, coming down to the bottom, ignoring those water lines because I'm going to put those in watercolour. And then lastly, over on the right hand side, we've got that duck bill coming in and around, got the tip of it, those nostrils, and then this one looking really quite mean over on the right hand side. I'm sure they're not, I'm sure they're probably really lovely ducks, but they just made me chuckle for how cross they looked walking towards the camera. There we go, around the body for that one. And one of the other things that this dot dash Morse code putting in the pen technique will do for you is that it will really help you understand where the elements of your painting sit. I call it like navigation. It's a sort of map of where things are placed. And I think that's really important because when you come to paint it, you don't want to be guessing about where things are going. It's like an orientation. So I've popped those ducks in and now I know exactly where they are, exactly where I'm going to find them and exactly where I can put everything else on my painting. That's my pen work done. That doesn't mean necessarily that's the end of my pen work. I might come back to it later. I'm going to go back to the photograph for you so that you can have a bit of a comparison between the pen work that I've done and the way that the ducks are set up in the photograph. So I'm hoping that I've captured those personalities of them moving towards you or standing still and being planted in the water. So let's go back. Here's my pad, and the first thing I'm going to do is I want to put a lovely background in on this and get some of the water in too. If I show you the original piece of work, you'll see that it's got a very soft background and the same colour that's in the sky is in the water too, and that's going to be really important because the water really reflects anything that's going on above it. So I'm going to tackle the sky area and the water area all in one go, and then I can put the ducks in and then I can put the shadows in. So let's go back to overhead and let's show you my palette. I've got a ceramic palette here and there are two colours I'm going to use for my background. Don't worry if you don't have these colours. I've chosen them because they happen to be two of my favourites. So we've got cerulean blue and we've got cobalt violet hue. These colours are two of my favourites because I know they're cool, I know that they will disappear into the background, and I know that they're going to produce this technique well. But like I say, the success of your painting does not stand and fall on you having these exact colours. So there's a bit of my cerulean blue, a kind of pea size amount. And here's my cobalt violet going in as well. Nearly to the end of that tube, I need to buy myself a new one. So there's the cobalt violet, there's the cerulean blue, I've got that ready. I'm going to pop that to one side, just over here. And I've got a large pot of water and a very beautiful size 10 imitation sable brush. These are my favourite brushes now. I haven't used any other brushes for well over a year now. I think these have all of the properties of sable, but without the price tag concerns or the ecological concerns either, and they hold plenty of water. So I've got a size 10 in that. I've got my spray bottle at the ready, and I've got my kitchen roll too. And my kitchen roll is all scrunched up, ready to go, because I'm going to put lots of water down. I'm going to drop the colour in, paint around my ducks, paint in the water, and I'm going to hopefully achieve a nice soft background. So let's give it a go. I'm going to spray all the way around the edge, all up and over the top of my ducks. So I'm sort of creating a horseshoe shape. I've got water all the way up and around here. And down at the bottom, I'm going to put a little bit of water. So I'm kind of creating a bit of a donut shape. I've got water all the way around. It's not right up to the ducks. This is dry paper here. And I'm going to allow that water to soak into my surface a little bit, because I just want my colour, when I get that far, to diffuse into it. So I've got my cerulean blue, you can probably just see it in the shot there. I'm going to create a nice puddle of that and a nice puddle of the cobalt violet too over here. And now that that water has sunk into the paper a little bit, I'm just going to go for it with my colours. So here's my cerulean. Where it goes onto the dry paper, I'm going to be able to create a nice crisp edge so I can paint around my ducks without any fear at all of it running into the ducks. But like I said, where you've done that lovely Morse code technique, it doesn't matter if your brush just happens to go over into the duck ever so slightly. You don't want them looking like cardboard cutouts. And therefore, if a little bit of the blue goes into the duck, that's fine. So we've got a bit of blue over here, and what I mustn't forget to do whilst I'm here is put some of the colour into the water. Now the difference between the strokes that I'm using in the water and the strokes that I'm using in the sky is the fact that the sky ones are radiating outwards and the ones in the water are flat and long, and that will hopefully give that illusion that the ducks are actually standing in something. So let's get a few more of those in. You can see down here where it's starting to hit that water, they're diffusing really nicely. And let's go in with the cobalt violet, one of my favourite colours, it has to be said. So this can go into some of the spaces around the ducks. I'm really trying so hard to not fill everything in, because I know if I start filling everything in, then I will be starting to faff, and then my picture will lose just that little bit of an impressionistic quality. So popping that colour into the right hand side, didn't put quite enough water in there, so I'm using a bit of water from my pot to move that around. And then of course it's very important that I put some of that colour near where my ducks are, kind of reflecting it, a little bit sort of opposite. But again, trying really hard not to fill everything in. Where else have I got some of that lovely cobalt violet? I've got some over here. So let's put some under this duck with a few long brush strokes. Now, when I'm happy that I've got the colour in all the places that I want, I need to step away from my brush and I need to get hold of my kitchen roll and roll that back into the area that I have painted. So we're using that rag rolling technique of very lightly working our way back in. And it's quite important at this stage that you really don't put your brush back into it. If you put your brush back into it, you are in grave danger of creating something which we call cauliflowers. Technically, they're called back runs. And back run is what happens when you put a brush that is far wetter than the surface back in and it pushes all the colour away, and you get that kind of bloom going on. And that bloom tends to simulate a cauliflower. So we are trying to avoid those and trying so hard to not put the brush back into that surface. I'm going to step away from it and I'm just going to take a couple of seconds to dry this with the heat gun. So let's show you the painting just while I do that. And I'm going to lift it up ever so slightly. Excuse me just 2 seconds while I give this a bit of a dry. Just to take the edge off it a little bit. And then that should be better. I'm going to let that sink in just a little bit and give that just a bit of time. Okay, so now we've got that colour on, let me straighten that back up for you. And we now need to tackle the ducks themselves. So you can see I'm really happy actually with the way that background has gone on. It's working really beautifully. It's creating that kind of atmosphere. It's not my choice as a painter to paint edge to edge. That's just not a technique that for me particularly works. And so that vignetted, soft-edged, wet into wet kind of diffusion, for me, I think has offsets the ducks. Now I can paint them in really crisp and really sharp, and that background is literally going to disappear into the background. Now, it's very tempting at this stage of a painting to lose faith with it because you've got lots of colour going on around here, and it seems that your ducks are being pushed away. And if you're not very happy with your background, this is, like I say, a case when you lose all heart with your painting and you think, oh goodness, the ducks aren't quite what I want, they're not sharp enough, they don't look like the right shape, but you haven't painted them yet. So don't worry about it. Crack on with your painting, get further to the end, and then give it a bit of an assessment. So this is just the background stage. We are yet to do anything on the ducks, and that's what we're going to do next. So for the duck part of the proceedings today, I've got warm sepia. So again, I'm going to put a little dot of that into my ceramic palette over there. And I'm also going to use some translucent grey. Now I'm going to show you these colours on swatches because when you squeeze them out, they look so dark, it's really tough to see the difference between them. But these are two of my favourite SAA tubed watercolours. This is the warm sepia on the right. It's a semi-transparent colour, but can you see how lovely and rich it is? It's a perfect duck colour. And then the translucent grey, which is the one over here, can produce some really lovely darks for you. But also you can get some really light shadow colours out of it too, and that's exactly what we're going to use it for today. So I'm now going to switch to a size 6 imitation sable brush, and I'm going to create two little puddles of colour. Over on the right hand side we've got the warm sepia there, and we've got the translucent grey, and I will use those puddles of colour to feed what I'm about to do. Let's pop you back to the photograph so that you can see what I'm aiming for. The texture of the duck, I am going to use the Inktense blocks, but what I need to do is to get colour on almost everything so that I can add the texture over the top. So that's our next stage really. So I'm going to have my bit of kitchen roll, in my hand so that I can control the amount of paint and water that's on my brush. And over here, let's start with this duck. Actually, no, let's not start with this duck. I'm going to change my mind and start with this duck. We've got to make sure that this duck is nicely tucked in behind so that we can paint those 4 ducks over the top. So I'm going to start with the translucent brown, and all I'm going to do is to just, I think it probably needs to be a bit stronger than that. All we need to do is to put a little bit of colour in a V shape down in for that duck, and we're going to use a technique called blending out. So we use a little bit of water to soften the edge of that colour and bring that colour up and around, and all of a sudden you've got a duck starting to come to life a little bit. So it's got a lovely brown chest going in there, and where we've got it darker at the bottom, it's disappearing behind this duck, so this duck is now starting to pop out. So you've dealt with 2 really important watercolour techniques there. You've got blending out, so you've got popping a little bit of colour on and you're blending it away from that dark colour, and also you've got what's called negative painting. So in painting that duck, what's happening is that you are bringing these ducks forward. So that is working really well for me now, because actually, can you see this duck, where it's really light and bright on this edge, it's starting to pop out. So I'm really pleased with that. What's the next one that's behind? I think it's this one. So we're going to get this one in with a little bit of that really lovely warm sepia. And we're going to start on the left-hand side. Actually, in the photograph, you can see that we've got a darker area in this bottom left-hand corner anyway. So let's get that in and blending that out again, using plenty of water. I'm controlling the amount of water that I've got on my brush with my bit of kitchen roll. Very useful technique. And there again you see, got a nice shadow underneath. If it's not quite right, or if it's too dark and you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't have put that much on, then you can always use your kitchen roll to tap back into it, just to lift it out. But don't forget, try not to put your brush back into that again, because you'll get a cauliflower. So I've got that one done. Let's do this one on the left-hand side. Let's do that one over here. Oh, excuse me. And this one has got all of that shadow because she's so round, such a beautiful shape. And I'm using my brush almost like a pencil to kind of shade in, and then using my colour on my water on top of that to blend that out. And I can soften that edge with my kitchen roll. That's looking much better. She's looking much more solid now. And then over here on this side, we've got brown coming in on the left. So you can see how you can build those duck shapes up really, really quite quickly. So you've got that dark under there. Actually, that comes around the corner a little bit more. So let's get that coming around the corner. And we'll use the water to blend it out. And we need a little bit of kitchen roll in there. That's better. And also, where you've got that shadow, they're looking heavier at the bottom. You don't want your ducks to look like they're about to fly away. Over on this side, let's get that warm sepia in at the bottom. And then using the water to blend that out and pull the colour up. That's good. So now my ducks are looking a bit better. I need to address some of the brown on top of the female heads as well. So let's get that brown in. Actually, that needs to be darker too. Let's mix a little bit more pigment in. The fine point that I've got on this number 6 brush is working so well for me because I'm able to do larger areas and smaller detail all at the same time. So I've got this one up over the top. Let's get a little bit more on my brush, and again, all I'm doing is lightly tapping that colour in. There's a whole discussion to be had about mark making and where you make brush marks and how important they are. But for today, we're just going to block these ducks in. Let's get a bit of brown over there, and we'll get a bit of brown on that cheek over there too. Let's get that in. There we go, that's okay. So I've got this one more female to do here. Up and over the top. So we'll get that little bit of brown in. Like they've got little sort of skull caps on, isn't it? That's better. Got lovely light area going on here. The male duck, this male duck here, actually could do with a little bit of extra brown just around. It looks like he's got a shawl going on. And looking at your comments, please do, if you're watching us live, and my apologies for the few technical gremlins that we've had. Hopefully they've all ironed themselves out now, they've all gone away. And you'll be glad to know that my dogs have stopped barking in the background and my chickens have stopped clucking too. It was all go there for a minute. But this particular duck over here has got a bit of a shawl on, and while I dab that up, I can see that, thank you very much for sticking with us if you are joining us live and commenting in the chat. I'm glad you're enjoying some of the techniques that are going on. If you've got any questions, don't forget to pop them in there. I can't help you with technical ones, unfortunately, but I can help you with painting ones. So we've got our brown in. Now the one thing is so tempting to go straight into the grey and getting the colours in, but the one thing that I've got to make absolutely sure that I do before I do anything else is to get that reflected colour into the water, because our water is doing a really good job of reflecting the sky, but it's not doing a great job of reflecting the ducks at the moment. So I'm going to turn my hand sideways on, and I'm going to use that same stroke that I did before, that kind of left to right. I'm only using the tip of my brush. All these marks have to say is that there's a duck standing above it. It's reflected colour rather than any kind of detail. Let's have a look. I know we've got the legs to put in yet, but that's okay. We can build it up nice and slowly. And I've got this one over here. Now the duck that's a challenge is the one at the back. So I need to make sure that I don't ignore the fact that there is a duck back there too, and gets a little bit of the brown in, maybe not quite that much. That's better. Get that in there. And a little bit over on this left hand side too. I can always add to my water, much easier to add than it is to take away. Got the brown in, that's good. And now before I switch to the Inktense blocks, I am going to add some of the grey. Now this grey I'm adding for a little bit of shadow and a little bit of definition. If you're worried that your paper is still quite wet, then by all means use this time as an excuse to give it a quick dry. I'm going to crack on with mine so that you can see me starting to build it up. And again, I'm going to use my brush a little bit like a pen. So I can use the tip of it to get a shadow in, and then I can use the water to pull that colour out. If you're not confident with that technique, I quite understand. If you're not confident with that technique, practice it on a piece of paper first. There's always merit in you getting a scrap piece of watercolour paper or the back of a painting that you didn't particularly like. I have to say that's usually where the backs of my paintings end up, in practicing for something else. But this stage is all about making your ducks look more three-dimensional. So we've got a shadow on there. I think I could do with deepening this shadow and kind of sharpening it up a little bit over here. So we've got that shadow, and so I'm just deepening that bit even more so you can see the highlights starting to work. And over on this side, this duck certainly needs a shadow over next to this one. So we've got that negative painting technique going on again. Let's get that in and blend it out. That's better. That's better. She looks much more solid now. What's going on with this duck? Now this duck has got a real shadow going on over here on where her wing would be. So let's get that in. I really don't want this dark to mingle with this dark. I need these ducks to be slightly separate. So let's make sure that we bring that around the bottom, and let's put a nice shadow in on this side. I'm going to turn my hand upside down. If I wasn't working for the camera, I would probably turn my paper around. But today, it's fine. I can stand on my head a little bit, and I can use my kitchen roll just to mop up anything I'm not happy with. Right, that's in, I'm happy with that. Right, this one's got a bit of a dark shadow up here on her face too. I'm looking really hard at the photograph, following along all the things that the photograph is telling me to do, looking at where my shadows are, looking at where my highlights are, and putting them in according to the photographic reference. Good photographic reference for an artist is so important. You need it to give you as much information as you possibly can. Because if you're not fond of painting on location, or particularly if you're painting animals and they move around too fast, photographs are definitely the way forward. So what else have we got to do in this grey? I think the grey is probably going to make an appearance later too, but for the time being it's doing a fabulous job of getting our ducks grounded, so to speak. Do I want to put any in the water at this stage? I don't think I do. I'll save that for later. And let's introduce you to the star of the show today, our Inktense blocks. So these to me are a bit like paint in a stick. And the reason that I love them is because they're so versatile. I'm such a fan of products that will do more than one thing. And I'm going to show you some of the ways that I use the Inktense today. They are much stronger than a watercolour stick. They are, as the name suggests, much more like an ink, very strong colour. And the colours that I've got here is I've got a dark chocolate, a deep indigo, a light olive, and an assortment of others. But actually, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you haven't got the right orange and the right yellow and the right green. Use the colours that you've got because they're too much fun to use. Now, I've got some detail to do with these, but the first thing I wanted to show you was how I use them for texture. So I'm going to take the brown and, yeah, I'll just use the brown, I think, for the time being. And over here, I've got a little mini grater. Now, you could use a little bit of fine mesh, or you could use a nutmeg grater. I've used both very successfully. This is the one that I've ended up with just because this is sort of dedicated to my Inktense blocks. And we're going to use this to actually grate onto the surface, but we're going to control it first. I could grate, and then I could spray, and I could watch all the little gratings that are on the surface move and dissipate across the piece of paper, but I'm going to be cleverer than that. I'm going to take some water and lightly dust over the top of my ducks where I want them to have that little bit of texture. And then what will happen is the gratings from my Inktense block will stick to those areas, and I can remove anything that goes anywhere else. So I've got those three to start with, and then you don't have to do an awful lot, only very lightly, tiny little bit of movement, but it's like a ta-da moment. You can see when I take my grater away, what I've then got is a lovely texture on the body of my ducks without it going all over the place. So if you can hear my dogs barking in the background, I do apologise. A delivery man has just turned up. Another joy of working from home. It's a shame they're not quacking, really. That would have been much more fitting. So there you go again. I had the water down here. I've grated my Inktense block into that water, and I've got that lovely texture going on. And I think this is still wet enough over here, so let's do that last one just over here. And there we go, we've got that texture again. Now again, it is so tempting to grate everything. It's such a lovely addictive technique. And yes, of course, you could put texture in the background if you wanted to, but I am going to leave it at that for those ducks. What I did want to show you, to bring these ducks together in some sort of unity, you can use these like a paint. It's perfectly possible to use them like a paint. And what you do is, I usually assign one end of my stick for this. You can use them a little bit like a half pan. So you can rub a damp brush across the surface, and that will pick up enough paint to then be able to transfer that colour elsewhere. So that lovely kind of shawl, that ruff that those male ducks have got over on this side, I can use my Inktense to do that. So over here I've got a little bit more colour going on over on this side. And then what happens is, because we've obviously got male ducks and female ducks, because I've used that colour over here for texture, you're bringing the species together by making all the colours associated with each other. So I've got a dark over here. I might use a little bit of that dark down underneath on the kind of the belly of this duck too. So you can see how those Inktense blocks suddenly become multi-purpose. We better do the same to this duck over here. So let's get that colour in and underneath this mean looking duck over here, and I can still use my water to blend it out. I have to be a bit faster with the Inktense because it does stick quicker. But what I get is a lovely rich colour. So let's get that all blended out. There we go. And it means that, of course, you've probably seen where I'm heading with this now. What it means is that if I don't want to use watercolour, or if I'm out on location, or if I just want a small quantity of something, I can use my Inktense sticks for those little feature colours. So I'm going to start with the green on the male over here, on this mallard. Bit of green at the top, blending that out with my brush, and I can add that colour in really quite quickly now. It's a lovely way, after you've done all the hard work of getting all the impressionistic parts of your painting in, it's a lovely way of filling in nice and quickly. So I've got that green over there, and I need to do some green over on this duck too. So let's get the top of his head in and blended out down and around. So I've got lovely green heads on there, and guess what's coming? The yellow and the orange. Now don't forget, what you can do with an Inktense stick, you don't have to grate it, you don't have to use it in a transfer technique. You can, of course, use them to draw directly onto your surface. And Inktense comes in block and it comes in pencil format too. So if you have both, then sometimes the pencil is more ideal for getting into fine detail, and sometimes the block is better for getting things in faster. What I would say to you is that less is more. You will probably notice that I'm putting hardly anything on the paper, and actually you'll see in a minute when I wet it with a brush that it's going to transfer that colour quite quickly. I need to just remember that he's got a foot in there. So I've put tiny little scribbles of the colour down, and I can use my wet brush. Look how quickly that blends. Now one thing I am going to do is I'm going to turn my brush on its side and blend that colour out into the water. So not only is it the colour of the leg, but it's also the colour of the reflection. So we'll get that in. I'm not over painting it at this stage. I'm really mindful of the fact that my ducks look nice and impressionistic. Oh, I've got a bit of Inktense going on. Oh, that's fine. That's all right, just to make sure we know he's got a leg. And then this one that I said to you was really so important, because She's lifting her leg out of the water. Now I can get that in and blended, and she's starting to move now. This one over here can have the same. Oh, I forgot to do the water. Getting ahead of myself, Ali. Getting the water over here. Now that only needs a little bit of colour. I can pick that colour up. Only needs a little bit of colour with a space in between because her foot is away from the surface. Let's get this one in and get that colour blended out. And the same over on this side too. So I've kind of taken care of the legs, I've taken care of the shadows. Now I definitely need to take care of those amazing beaks. So I'm going to use the transfer method again, getting that yellow in and dotting it around again, trying not to overpaint it. And same technique as I've used with the watercolour. So I'm putting a little bit of colour down and then blending it out. That's the wonderful thing about watercolours. You'll find that their techniques the techniques involved in them are completely transferable. So I've got that one in, and I've got this one in. Let's get this one in. Now this one's not got as much yellow and it's more brown, so I don't want to overdo that. What's happening to this one's a bit more orange. So let's pick up a bit of yellow and orange on the beak and get those in and blend it out. And then a bit of yellow and a bit of orange for this one too. Now I'm sure with your paintings you're going to spend more time on them than I have done. I don't want to be allowing you to sit here watching me faff. So I'm doing the impressionistic version of them today. Now when you've got everything blocked in, you have lots of options available to you. And one of the options is to assess what else your painting needs. Now my painting has got colour in the background. I'm really happy with that. It's got texture on the ducks. I'm loving with how bright the orange is. I'm okay with the shadows, maybe, with the reflections, maybe they could be a little bit darker. What I am really, really missing is an amount of detail on the duck. Now for this, today, I'm going to go back to my sketching pen. Now there's lots of ways that you could address the detail on here. We could sit with a very fine brush. I've got my little number 4 brush here. And you could sit with the translucent grey or one of your ink tent sticks, and you could go back in with your brush doing lots of detail if you wanted to. I'm not particularly a detail person, so I struggle with this technique because I find that I lose my patience with it. However, there is absolutely no reason why you can't go back in with your sketching pen to add texture over the top or add detail or add anything else that you think is necessary on your picture. With a pen and wash technique, people tend to do a bit of pen, then abandon it, wash their colour over the top, and then the pen never sees the light of day again. But I'm a big fan of going back in with my pen. Let's just make sure, yeah, it's dry enough. And now I can add some of that detail that maybe I was not confident enough to put in before. So let's get that duck's eye in so we get that lovely shape coming down her face. And now I can go back with my pen and I can add a little bit of extra detail and a little bit of extra texture. And she starts to come to life a little bit more. I can also start to break up some of the lines that I drew originally to give her a bit more body and to give her a bit more personality. Now I can see straight away, now that I've added that pen in, I need to add some more watercolour. I wasn't dark enough before, but as all watercolourists know, it's better to underdo it than overdo it. What I can now do is go back in with the brown, and instantly that's so much better. And popping those pen strokes in has really given me the confidence to be able to add that colour back in. And there you can see straight away she really starts to come to life. I've got a few other things to do to her, but I'll come back to her in a minute. Over here, I think I need to do the same. So we've got that mark coming down. Actually, I didn't fill her eye in. Let's fill in her eye a bit better. There we go, that's better. Beady eye, that's what we want. Beady-eyed ducks. Perhaps I should have called it that. So we've got pen, Over there, I can start to break the edge of that face up a little bit. And just with the tiniest of pen marks, you can all of a sudden really start to bring your creature portraits to life. You can neaten things up. If you think the pen is too harsh, there's absolutely no reason at all why you can't go back in with the pencil. Because sometimes, if you're not very confident with your drawing skills or your mark making skills, going back in with a pencil is much nicer, because if you make a mistake, you can just rub it out. Pencil won't rub out from underneath where watercolour has gone over the top of it, but it will certainly rub out from over the top. So you could put your lines in with pencil first and then go back over them with pen, or just simply leave them as pencil marks. I think one of the things people struggle with when they are learning to paint or going through their painting adventures is that they think things are wrong or right, and they're really not. If something works for you, then that's the way you need to be doing it, and it doesn't really matter what anybody else says. If you have created a painting and you're really happy with it, it doesn't matter how you got there. What's more important is that you're satisfied with the process. So let's get this beady-eyed one in. Fill in his eyes, that's better. His face has got a bit of a peculiar shape here, that's better. Get that in. And I've sort of neglected duck nostrils. Who thought that would be a sentence I would ever say? Let's get over to this side. They're very sleek, those males, aren't they? But I think he could do possibly with a deeper shadow over here. Let's pop one in. Let's see what happens, because if all else fails, I can always lift it out with a bit of kitchen roll. And you know what? I'm really glad I did that. Really glad I did that. And I think he probably needs to have a deeper shadow under his bill with a bit of the translucent grey and a bit of the brown maybe over the top. I might choose to do the ink tents. Like I said, no one way of doing it. He looks better now. So we've got this one over here. I'm staring so hard at the photograph now. There we go. We've got those eye shapes in, nostrils and beaks. Got that fabulous marking down the top of the head. And those cheeks coming down and around. And I think she needs to be a bit browner too. So we'll get the top in. And hopefully you can see these really starting to come to life. We've got a few final flourishes to do to them when I've got some more of this shading in. But at this point of the game, it's entirely your choice as to how much detail you put in. My only recommendation would be try not to put too much, because you can always prop the picture up somewhere, come back to it, have a look and say to yourself, actually, do you know what? It needs a little bit more highlight, needs a little bit more shadow. But what you don't want to do is push it too far and then it's hard to rescue it. It's never impossible to rescue something, but it just becomes a little bit harder. And I think that's when you start to get despondent with it. So we've got that coming around there, got the bill. Actually, this one's not too bad. I'm missing a little bit of texture on the males with that kind of shawl that comes around. So I'm going to put it in pen. This one's a bit trickier because he's face on, so I'm going to leave him alone, I think. And I think I'm going to switch back to my number 6 brush and increase the depth of the shadow on this one over here. He's looking a little bit pale and I think he needs deepening up. And I think as well that they need to have some of the shadows increasing underneath where they're standing. So I'm using that translucent grey underneath to increase the depth of the shadows so it really grounds them in the water. That same technique of putting a little bit of colour down and blending it out with the water. Let's do that over here too. Little bit of water, little bit of colour. I do it onto the dry paper because then I get a crisp line and I'm in control of where it's going. What I don't want to do really is to put it onto wet paper, because then it will diffuse and I won't get those nice kind of lines that look like the surface of the water. So let's get that in, let's get that in. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. There might be, I'm so in the area of faffing now, aren't I? But, I'm not faffing, but I'm going to increase the depth of the green in the tops of their heads, because where it's dried back a little bit, I don't think it's dark enough. So that's better. That wasn't faffing. I thought it might have been faffing, but it isn't. Luckily, I rescued myself. There we go, that's better. And I think this could do with being a little bit darker on the top. So we're layering up our colour now, and that's why these Inktense blocks are so brilliant for this. Okay, so I'm pretty pleased with that, it has to be said. I think it could do with a few final flourishes, if I'm honest. I think it could do with a little bit more texture. And I'm going to go back to my Inktense blocks again. And this time, I'm going to do the other version of the texture technique. Where's that one gone? Here it is. I'm going to grate a little bit of the Inktense onto dry paper. So I've got some on there, some at the bottom, and some over here. Let's do this one. I know that's a male, but he was missing out. And also, I've got a white stick. Now, one of the things that a white Inktense stick is so good for is going back and rescuing any highlights. So if there's any part of it that you're thinking, oh, I'm missing a highlight there, the white layers over the top of the colour really easily, so you can rescue any highlights that you might want by going back in. But I'm also going to use it for a bit of texture on them. Where the areas are dark, I can get added texture by grating my white over the top. And then just down here in the water, just as a bit of a final flourish, I'm going to put a little bit of the white, and I'm also going to put some blue. So I've got a little bit of blue going on, and then I'm going to be really brave. I'm going to take my spray bottle, and from quite a distance, if I do it down here, the air is just going to blow the powder away. So just from on high, I need a tiny bit of water to fix that colour that I grated on. And then I can use my kitchen roll just to mop up anything that I don't like the look of. But actually, I'm quite happy with those. And let's get those texture marks in the foreground where I've got the blue sprayed in too. And there is my completed Reservoir ducks painting, which I do hope you've been able to follow along with. Let's switch you back to my other camera, and then I'm in a good place to be saying goodbye to you. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. My apologies for any of the gremlins. This is the notion of doing it live and beaming straight from my studio, but thank you for joining me. I did want to say an enormous thank you, not only to you guys for joining me, but also to the SAA for allowing me to do this, because at the moment artists are struggling to share what they do, and so I'm immensely grateful to all the team for allowing me to do this. I hope that this has given you a little bit of respite in amongst all of the chaos that's going on outside of your homes. I hope that you are continuing to stay very safe and very well. Hopefully I will see you again very soon. Take care everybody, and enjoy your painting journeys, won't you?